To everyone. A pleasant good morning to everyone. On behalf of the Director General, Ministry of the Public Service, the Management of the Learning and Development Directorate, and the Department of Emergency Management, Ministry of Home Affairs, Information and Public Affairs, I extend a warm welcome to this webinar presentation on emergency evacuation in the workplace. This presentation is being brought to you by the Learning and Development Directorate in collaboration with the Department of Emergency Management. I am your moderator, Jeanette King, Human Resource Officer at the Learning and Development Directorate. Apart from my voice this morning and that of your presenter, whom I will present to you shortly, we have our producer, Mr. Michael Clark, Human Resource Officer at the Learning and Development Directorate. Emergency evacuation in the workplace. It is perhaps not a topic that is foremost in our minds, and perhaps because we have taken it for granted that we generally have had few and far between incidents that warrant this kind of action. But it is not to say that we should not be prepared. Dare I say, these are different times, and we should be prepared for the unexpected or the unusual. This morning, we will be given this opportunity to reflect on our preparedness in the workplace for emergency evacuation, what we need to have in place, and what we need to do in the event of emergency evacuation. But before we begin, here are a few protocols to optimize your participation in the webinar. These help us to achieve optimal benefit from our interaction by reducing feedback and increasing bandwidth. We would like you to mute your microphone and turn your camera off. Minimize distractions as much as possible. Most of all, please do participate fully in the webinar. During the course of the presentation, we will involve you in some learning activity and we share the information with you. These may include some questions and polls. At various stages during the presentation, you can make your notes and place your questions, comments, or queries in the chat box. And they will be shared with and addressed by our presenter during our questions and answers segment at the end of the presentation. You can find your chat box by clicking on the chat icon at the bottom of your screen. Please note that this presentation is being recorded and it will be made available to you on the Learning and Development Directorate's YouTube channel. At the end of the webinar, a link to an evaluation form will be placed in the chat. You are encouraged to complete the evaluation form and submit it forthwith. Your feedback is very important to us. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to begin, and we have with us this morning to guide us through what we need to know in emergency evacuation in the workplace, Ms. Joyanne Johnson. Joyanne Johnson is currently a program officer and has been with the Department of Emergency Management for the past 7 years. She is a published author and poet. Maybe Joyanne can recite a bit of her poetry for us later. Anyway, a warm welcome, Joyanne, and over to you.
A blessed good morning to everyone, and thank you, Mrs. King, for that warm welcome and introduction. On behalf of the Director, Department of Emergency Management, I express sincere thanks to the Learning and Development Directorate for the facilitation of today's webinar. I trust that you, the participants, will find this presentation useful. By the end of the presentation, you should be able to define emergency evacuation, state the types of evacuation, outline the reasons for evacuation, differentiate between the various evacuation procedures, list the elements that are included in the emergency plan, discuss the legislation governing emergency evacuation. The first segment of this presentation will focus on emergency evacuation. Can anyone define what emergency evacuation is? Feel free to type your answers in the chat. I will repeat. Can anyone define what emergency evacuation is? Please type your answers in the chat. I'll give you 1 more minute. Okay, I see Janelle Nembard has said the process of exiting a building or structures quickly and safely. Kurt Belgrave, the requirement to vacate the building as safely and expeditiously as possible. Some others will say safe exit of a building, the immediate escape of people from the area of our threat. Thank you. Yes, you are all correct. You are all correct. Emergency evacuation is the immediate and urgent movement of people away from a threat or actual occurrence of a hazard to a predesignated or determined safe area or assembly point. Emergency evacuation is not an opportunity for you to go anywhere except to your designated assembly point. Therefore, it is not an opportunity for you to pick up your children from school early and head to Chauffette, or to link up with your friends to meet at Sheraton Center, nor to pop into Massey to purchase items on special. Emergency evacuation is not a time for panicking. Remain calm, as panicking can cause persons to lose focus and not think rationally. For example, the image at the bottom highlights several persons attempting to exit one door, creating what is referred to as a bottleneck event. Whereas the next door has easy access for persons to exit. The other image demonstrates that during emergency situations, persons do not always think rationally. Emergency evacuation, it is not the time to make assumptions about the emergency alarm. Do not, under no circumstances, assume that the ringing of the emergency alarm means that it is a drill. Assuming may very well result in injuries to yourself and others, or can even result in death. So why evacuate? Evacuation is required when the conditions inside a building pose a threat to the health and safety of persons in the building, whether these persons are the employees, visitors, or workmen. This threat may result from man-made hazards, or sometimes you may hear it referred to as anthropogenic hazards, which is simply another word for man-made hazards. Or it may result from natural hazards. For example, fire, power outages, bomb threats, explosions, earthquakes, chemical spills, explosions, escape of dangerous gases, workplace violence. Now, let us look at the types of emergencies which may require persons to evacuate. Evacuation may be required due to a natural emergency, which is as a result of a natural hazard, example, an earthquake or tsunami. A work-related emergency, which is as a result of the nature of the work conducted in the workplace. Example, the chemical spills, explosions, escape of dangerous gases into the atmosphere. Evacuation is also required for a civil emergency, which is as a result of protests, strikes, workplace violence, or harassment. Okay, it is time to test what you have learned so far about emergency evacuation. I have 5 questions to test your knowledge on emergency evacuations. Let us go to the polls for your responses to these 5 questions. Thank you. Okay, question 1. If the fire alarm sounds in your building, only the staff members need to evacuate. Is that true or is it false?
We have some answers coming in, Joanne.
Yes, I see some
Yes.
answers in the chat. False, false. If the fire alarm sounds in your building, only the staff members need to evacuate. False. That is indeed correct. Thank you, everyone. Next question. Question 2. The fire alarm sounds in your building. Therefore, you should A, tweet to your friends that there is a fire drill. B, search diligently for your belongings and gather them up. C, exit the building in a quick and orderly manner and gather at the assembly area. D, arrange to meet your friends at Sky Mall during the event. E, none of the above. And I see some answers are in the chat. Yes, you are all correct. C is indeed the answer. Exit the building in a quick and orderly manner and gather at the assembly area. Okay, on to question 3. You hear that there is a cane fire in Marchfield, St. Philip. Your office is in Baobab Towers in Lawrence. Do you raise the alarm and evacuate the building? A, yes, or B, no? I see some answers in the chat and they're all saying B. You are indeed correct. No, you do not raise a fire alarm. A cane fire in Marchfield, St. Philip will not have an impact on Baobab Towers. Thank you, everyone. On to question 4. A 5.0 magnitude earthquake rattles your office building and you evacuate. After 20 minutes, there is no more rattling. You go back into your building. Was your action correct? A, no. B, yes. You may feel free to continue typing your answers in the chat. I see Chantal and Jillian. Oh no, A, no. Yes, you are all correct. The answer is no. Your actions were not correct. You must wait until someone inspects the building to ensure that it is safe for you to return. Okay, and the final question in this poll for this segment of the presentation. Evacuations are required for both natural and man-made hazards. A, true. B, false. Yes, I see some answers in the chat. A, true. Yes, you are all indeed correct. Evacuations are required for both natural and man-made hazards. Thank you everyone for participating in that poll. Now, let us take a brief look at the types of evacuation. There are 4 types of evacuation. These are shelter in place, building evacuation, campus evacuation, and city evacuation. we will look briefly at the various types of evacuation. However, we will discuss primarily the shelter in place and building evacuation. Okay, shelter in place. Sheltering in place is a type of evacuation. Despite you are not evacuating an area or building, it is used when you cannot escape the imminent danger. For example, from a violent intruder or an active shooter in your building. Next one is building evacuation. Building evacuation can involve exiting several buildings. These can either be single-story or multi-story buildings or several buildings. For example, the Central Bank of Barbados, which is a multi-story building, or the Arawak cement plant, which has several buildings on its compound, as can be seen on the slide. Then there is campus evacuation. Campus evacuation can involve exiting several buildings, whether there are single or multi-stories, all located on the same compound with very few entrances or exits. For example, the Cahill campus of the University of the West Indies. Finally, then there is city evacuation. This is the large-scale evacuation or mass exit from the impacted area. This type of evacuation is conducted with the assistance of the national authorities, as it involves several players from various sectors. For example, transportation. To assist with transporting persons from the evacuated area to a safe area. Shelter. To ensure that persons evacuated have a safe place to stay until they can return to the impacted area. And law enforcement, to ensure that law and order is maintained during the evacuation process. Let's now have a look at emergency evacuation procedures. It is important to note that each type of hazard event requires a different evacuation procedure. We will be discussing the evacuation procedures for fires, earthquakes, tsunamis, active shooter in the workplace, or violence. For fire, evacuate the building immediately using the stairs and not the elevator, and go immediately to the assembly point, which is upwind. Remember, upwind and not downwind from the fire, as you do not want the situation where you escape the fire but die of smoke inhalation. For earthquake, while the building is shaking, if you are able-bodied, you drop, cover, and hold on. Make sure you hold on in the event that while the shaking continues, the table or whatever it is you are holding on to moves. For wheelchair users, you lock the wheelchair, interlock your fingers, and place your hands behind your head, as seen in the image of the lady at the bottom left on the screen. Hold over or cover and hold on. If there is nothing for you to cover under, you drop, interlock your fingers, and place them behind your head, as seen in the image at the bottom right on the screen. Interlocking your hands and placing them behind your head protects your head from falling debris. Let me state at this point that there are other procedures for an earthquake that may be used, but for the purpose of this webinar, we will focus on the drop, cover, and hold on procedure. For tsunamis, if you feel an earthquake that knocks you to your feet, chances are a tsunami will follow. I pause here to say that depending on the type of tsunami it is, will determine the arrival time of the first wave. Therefore, if you are near the coast, proceed as quickly as possible to higher ground. If you are in a single-story building and you think it is safe for you to evacuate to the rooftop, then do so. Otherwise, evacuate the building and proceed to higher ground. If you are in a multi-story building, preferably 3 stories or higher, evacuate to the higher floors or the roof. For an active shooter or violent person, once there is a safe escape route, go right ahead and escape. However, if you cannot escape safely, then shelter in place. Block doors and avoid windows and silence, I repeat, silence your cell phones. You do not want a situation where you are safely hidden. Then your cell phone rings, alerting the intruder or shooter of your location. Now let us turn our attention to methods of evacuation. Emergencies may require you to evacuate using several methods, which can either be partial, horizontal, vertical, or total evacuation. Partial evacuation can be of a floor, room, or section of a building. On the other hand, horizontal evacuation can be moving away from the area of danger to a safer area on the same floor. This is used when evacuees must remain on the floor until help arrives. Vertical evacuation, which we are more familiar with, is usually the preferred method to exit a building during a drill or actual event. The stairs, and I repeat, the stairs must be used and not the elevator. Finally, there's total evacuation. This requires everyone in the building or impacted area to exit the area or building. Thank you. Now, a quick pause to test your knowledge on emergency signage before we go again to the polls to gather what you have learned about evacuation procedures. Emergency exit signs are critical to your safety. They serve as a shining beacon and highlight a safe route of escape. Can anyone identify these signs? Please quickly type your answers in the chat. If you think that the image for C is a unisex bathroom, then type the letter C and the corresponding answer, unisex bathroom. I'll give you a few seconds to do that. So go right ahead and answer the question. I see some answers are coming in. So far, you're all indeed correct. And yes, B is the fire extinguisher. So for A, in case of fire, use the stairs. B, the symbol represents fire extinguisher. And C, you are all indeed correct. This is the signage for assembly points. Thank you, everyone. Yes, you are indeed correct. Now let's see what you have learned about evacuation procedures. Again, to the polls. Are you all ready? I am. I'm anxious to see how you respond. So, 1, you are in Tower 2 and are required to evacuate from level 10 to level 6. This is an example of A, horizontal evacuation, B, total evacuation, C, vertical evacuation, or D, city evacuation. Let us see what the chat says. A, horizontal evacuation, B, total evacuation, C, vertical evacuation, or D, city evacuation. you are required to evacuate from level 10 to level 6. Indeed, all of you are indeed correct. That is from a vertical evacuation. Thank you, everyone. On to question 2. Okay, you are attending a meeting at the General Post Office building, and an evacuation procedure requires you to evacuate from the second floor, the top floor, and the roof. This procedure is required for A, active shooter, B, earthquake, C, tsunami, or D, fire. Which is it? A, B, C, or D? The answer is in the chat. Yes, C, tsunami, C, tsunami. Yes, in this case, C is indeed correct. That evacuation procedure is for the hazard tsunami. On to the next question. Ready. Which one is the most appropriate Which one is the most appropriate? Evacuation from your workplace should be done in A, slow moving motion to ensure that you have time to remove your heels so your fancy heels will not be broken. B, safely, timely, and in a controlled manner. C, quick manner and through any door you can find. D, speedily and in an aggressive manner to ensure you get hooked first. Or E, none of the above. Which is it? A, B, C, D, or E? And the answer is in the chat. B, B, B. Yes, you are indeed all correct. The answer is B. When evacuating, it should be done in a safe, timely, and a controlled manner. You are all doing so well. Should I continue? Next question. The DCH in the earthquake evacuation procedure stands for A, data clearinghouse, B, do not connect the hub, C, drop, cover, and hold, D, direct contact heat, or E, dual channel hub. Which one is it? Yes, everyone is correct. The DCH in the earthquake procedure stands for drop, cover, and hold. So that's so easy to remember. DCH, drop, cover, and hold on. Thank you, everyone. On to the final question in this segment of the presentation. Okay. You are faced with a situation when escape is not possible, and it is best to hide by sheltering in place. Which hazard should require this procedure? A, tsunami, B, active shooter, C, earthquake, D, fire, E, chemical spill. Yes, the answer is indeed B, active shooter. When escape is not possible, you shelter in place. And remember to silence those cell phones. Silence those cell phones. So thank you, each and every one of you, for answering those questions in the poll. We will now focus on the topic emergency evacuation planning. In order to plan efficiently for evacuation, you must have an emergency plan. Having an emergency plan seeks to ensure that fatalities and injuries are minimized and damage to physical infrastructure is reduced. So, what is an emergency plan? An emergency plan outlines the procedures for handling unexpected situations, whether they are as a result of a natural or man-made hazard. When creating an emergency plan, there are some things that should be included in this plan. For example, a list of all potential hazards, the required actions, the procedures to follow, and the available resources. The names and roles of your health and safety committee, a list of emergency response personnel and their contact information, a copy of your floor plans, and a map showing the evacuation routes. As I stated, the emergency plan should have a copy of evacuation plan. An example of an evacuation plan is shown on the image. The evacuation plan outlines the route which employees should take to exit the area of work and the building quickly to minimize the risk of possible injury. As you can see on the screen, there are two diagrams which outlines the route which both Group 1 and Group 2 should take in the event that they have to evacuate the area of work. Okay, so when designing your emergency evacuation plan, consideration must be given to a number of persons, noting that our workforce comprises of a diverse group of persons, and provision must be made to ensure that they can evacuate without any due hardship to themselves. Therefore, when you are planning, you must take into consideration such groups as wheelchair users, deaf or hard of hearing persons, persons who are blind or have low vision, persons with learning or intellectual disabilities, the elderly, and persons who are obese. Consideration must also be given to your neighbors, not just those located on the same floor or within the same building, but those persons whose businesses or homes are located in close proximity to your building. For example, the Central Bank of Barbados is located in a close proximity to a densely populated neighborhood. So when they are drafting the emergency plan, consideration should be given to those homes or businesses located close by. I also mentioned that the emergency plan should identify your health and safety committee. Some of the duties of this committee are to promote health and safety in the workplace, have an input in the development and implementation of the emergency plan, inform management about any hazardous situations and initiate actions on these hazards, respond to employees' concerns about health safety issues, and to identify any training which is needed for the promotion of health and safety in the workplace. I know that was a mouthful, but now it's time to quiz you on the evacuation planning. So we're back to the polls again. Are you ready? Question 1. You have been asked to design an emergency evacuation plan for your building. Which of the following groups must consideration be given to? A, persons with disabilities. B, elderly persons. C, persons who are obese. D, wheelchair-bound persons. Or E, all of the above. And the chat, they're so active. They're going even before I finish the question. And yes, you are indeed correct. The answer is E, all of the above. When designing your emergency plan, consideration must be given to all of those because we work in a diverse group of persons. Okay, next question, question 2. Having an emergency plan helps to prevent loss of life. Is that true or is it false? Go right ahead and type your answers in that chat. Let me see who will be the first. And Humphrey P, you're off and you're indeed correct. All of the others, A, yes. Having an emergency plan helps to prevent loss of life. Thank you, everyone. On to question 2. I see that you all are very anxious. Come on, question 2. Your building evacuation plan should be on display for all to see. Is that true or is it false? And we are off to a very good start. A represents true, and you are indeed all correct. Your building evacuation plan should be on display for all to see. Okay, the next question in the poll. Are you ready? What is the most important aspect of emergency planning? A, ticking a box to ensure that you comply with the international standards. B, communication. C, to impress the visitors to your organization. Or D, to ensure that you prevent your organization from being sued. So is it A, B, C, or D? Let's go to the chat. And you are all indeed correct. The answer is indeed communication. Communication is the most important aspect of emergency planning. It does not make sense to have an emergency plan and then it's not communicated to the staff. Okay. The next question, and this is the final question in this segment of the presentation. Okay, are you ready? You have been asked to prepare an emergency plan for your organization. Which of the following should be included in the plan? A, the hazards of which your workplace may be vulnerable. B, the names and roles of the Health and Safety Committee. C, a list of emergency response personnel. D, the procedures to follow. Or E, all of the above. And yes, you are indeed all correct. The answer is E, all of the above. All of these things should be in your emergency plan. So I am expecting that when I say that these agencies should have an emergency plan, you all will volunteer to write or draft that emergency plan. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We will now look very briefly at the legislation relating to emergency evacuation. For further information on this topic, I advise that you contact the Labor Department, who I am sure will be willing to answer all your questions regarding the legislation which relates to evacuation. Okay, so there are several sections of the Safety and Health at Work Act, commonly referred to as the Shaw Act. However, I will just speak to 3 of them, and I will repeat here. For further information on the legislation governing evacuation, you contact the Labor Department. Okay, so Section 6 of the Shaw Act. It speaks to the employer providing a safe and healthy environment for work, including the provision of information and training. Therefore, the onus lies on the employer to ensure that your work environment is not only safe, but also healthy, and to ensure that you are trained in aspects of health and safety. Then there's Section 2, provision and maintenance of fire escape. Thus, the employer has a duty to ensure that there is a safe passage of escape from a fire. It must be noted that escape from other hazards can be implied in this section 32 as well. Then there's section 41. This sets out the instructions regarding the escape in the event of a fire and speaks to the steps which are to be taken to ensure that employees are familiar with the means of escape in case of a fire. Thank you. Okay, so these are just a few websites which can provide further information relating to evacuation procedures, the types of evacuation, the types of emergencies requiring evacuation. Okay, that brings me to the end of my presentation. You can go ahead and type your questions in the chat, and I will ask our moderator to share those with me as others type their questions in the chat. I want to thank you at this time for taking the time from your busy schedule to attend this session and for your avid participation, your questions, your comments, and being so fast within the chat responding to the poll questions. Should you feel need further information, please free to contact me. That's Joyanne Johnson at the Department of Emergency Management. I'll now hand over to Mrs. King and await your questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so very much, Joanne. Colleagues, we have a question and answer segment. Feel free to place your questions in the chat. I recognize that some of you already have placed some questions in the chat. Let's see what we have here. Someone says, our building has a swipe card access. In the case of emergency, is that access disabled for easy exit?
It should be disabled in the event that there's any hazard or any situation, or even if there's a drill. The maintenance or whoever is responsible should deactivate that swipe system.
Okay. Attendee, does that answer your question? Okay, I'm looking for some more questions in the chat. Please free to put your questions in the chat.
Okay, I see 2 questions so far. What would it go?
Okay, I have
should
one.
be done? Okay, what should be done if there is an active shooter and you cannot hide? For an active shooter, they usually say escape if possible, shelter in place, and last resort is to fight. That's what they usually say. However, I would hope that if there's an active shooter, you do have enough time, because you would hear the shots ringing out. So you would have enough time, because fighting is the last resort.
Okay.
I hope that answers Dale Williams' question. And I see a question from Jamal Gill. Are officers still supposed to have a basic emergency kit accessible to staff? I would say yes, but you should definitely contact the Labor Department, but I would say yes. Does that answer your question, Mr. Gill? Okay, Sandrine Brown, what is the next step for the committee? What is the next step for the committee when management does not acknowledge the suggestions made, except quit the committee? I will say to contact, do not quit, do not give up so easy. Contact the Labor Department and ask for guidance where that is concerned. Does that answer your question, Ms. Brown? I see Ms. Marshall said, please send a copy of the presentation to share with staff. You can contact Mrs. King at the department. She's our moderator. I'm sure she will make the presentation available to you. If that is their policy, then sure, it can be made available to you.
Yes, attendees, as you recall, I would have said at the beginning that a recording of the presentation will be made available to you on the Learning and Development YouTube channel. Sorry, I'm tying my tongue out there. So we hope to get that to you as soon as possible.
Okay, if you have someone who is confined to a wheelchair and has some kind of paralysis, what measures do they take in the event of an earthquake? I do not understand when you say, if you mean, are their hands free? If their hands are free and they're able to move their hands, they can interlock them behind their head, as was shown in the slide, interlock them. First of all, they should lock the wheelchair so it will not move when the shaking is, when they're shaking. Interlock your hands, place them behind your head and hold over. I am not sure if that's what you mean, if their hands are able to move. So Ms. Hackett, I am not sure if that answered your question. I'll go on to Mr. Ward. When referring to the central bank, mention was made of consideration of the adjacent community in the plan. Some more elaboration is required. Is this in relation to knowing and offering assistance to vulnerable persons dependent on the hazard? Is it in relation to the impact of the evacuation event at the central bank on the adjacent community? I think further discussion of how this is reflected in the plan should be used. Consideration should be given to the persons located because, for example, if you're located in a very densely area and there's a fire in the building and that fire can impact the community, when the fire, you need to let someone in the community know so that they too can evacuate or make alternative arrangements, whichever is the case. That is what I am referring to. I'm not referring to that you may need to go and assist vulnerable persons in that community. Just alert them that there's a hazardous situation going on in your premises and there may need to evacuate. Does that answer your question, Mr. Ward? Oh, I see Miss Hackett. Sorry, G Hackett says if they can't use their hands. If they can't use their hands, then that is where the buddy system comes in. Then you as their work colleague can help assist them. If you're not sure how to assist to lift some person in a wheelchair or to hold your wheelchair, or but you as this is where the buddy system comes in and you can assist that person. Angela Newton, what are the items that should be included in the emergency kit? The basic first aid system, they say alcohol, gauze, and plasters. But for a further list, I can send you that list because it all depends on how large your first aid kit is. But I can send you the basic items, a list of the basic items. So, Mr. Ward, I want to know if your question was answered. So you can just say yes or no in the chat, Ricardo Ward. Ricardo Ward, you say yes and no, not fully. If you need further information, we can speak, but it is not to inform them that you go and assist them with getting their vulnerable persons out. It is just to let them know because they're so close to your building. Let them know because we have a situation, the fire is here. The fire may extend because you don't have control over fire, so it may extend and it may impact on them, so that they can put themselves in a state of readiness should the fire comes over to their homes or their properties or their businesses. How often should emergency evacuation drills be held? At least for fire, I think the Barbados Fire Service at least twice yearly. But for the earthquakes and tsunami, you can't do that maybe we can say twice as well, but you should definitely do one. So if your agency or your department have not done an earthquake drill as yet, I would advise that you do it. Is there a requirement for a specific number of exit routes for proper evacuation during an emergency? It all depends on the size of your building. Is there a requirement for a specific number of exits? It all depends on the size of your building, but definitely for fire, you can also contact the Barbados Fire Service. I'm sure the Chief Fire Officer will be very helpful. Can a DEM officer come to your office and supervise a drill? It all depends. If you're holding a normal fire drill, you don't need to just contact the fire department. They would assist you. If you need assistance in just on an earthquake drill, not necessary, but we don't necessarily have to be there, but we can give you guidance. So Mr. Gills, I hope that answers your question. My office is on Robert Street and very little areas close by to assembly. Who can advise of an appropriate for the fire, remember for evacuation for the assembly point for a fire, it needs to be upwind from the fire. So Ms. Goodrich, for the fire, I would advise that you contact the Barbados Fire Service. Very different for who. If for a tsunami, no, Robert Street Bridgetown is pretty low lying area. You evacuate as far inland as possible. And if it's an earthquake, when you evacuate the building after the shaking has stopped, you try to move away from any in areas like overhanging trees, new utility poles, from even the building itself. So I hope that answers your question, Ms. Goodrich. Angela Newton, I seem to have answered your question. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Gill, it is good to do a series of drills for different events because, as I stated, each hazard has a different procedure, evacuation procedure. Remember, for fire, you evacuate and you up to go upwind. For tsunami, if you cannot, if there's, okay, let me go for a tsunami. There are three types of tsunamis. There's the local tsunami, that gives a time frame about 15 minutes to half an hour before the first wave reach the island. Then there's the regional tsunami. It's about maybe 1 hour before the first wave should reach. And then there's the tally tsunamis. This is coming from all across Africa. So it takes maybe about 7 hours before the first wave get there. So you do have time to evacuate for the tally tsunami and the regional tsunami, depending on where you are. But for the local tsunami, it's not very much time. So if you're in a low-lying area, just head to higher ground immediately. If your building is located on the coast, you try to get to the higher floors, the third floor or the roof. But if it is multi-story, maybe 10, you can always go to the top floor. It's safe. It's pretty safe there. So yes, Mr. Gill, it's good to do evacuation drills for different events. Okay, Ricardo Ward. So what needs to be reflected in the plan? That is, when evaluating the hazard, what specifically should be reflected in the plan in terms of communication to the adjacent communities, specific persons in the communities, use of megaphones over and above the building's alarm. What if the central bank is aware of a tsunami? Is there an obligation to offer refuge to persons? No, I do not think that to my knowledge, and the central bank would not allow persons because of security reasons into that building. As I know that for sure, yes. They would not allow persons into that building to seek refuge from a tsunami. No, so they're not obligated to offer refuge to persons. No, but going back up, when evacuating has the what specifically should be effective in terms of communication. When you're doing a plan, your health and safety committee would have probably a communication officer in there, and that person will be responsible for making contact to a person within the community. It can be a priest, it can be the district emergency organization, it can be anyone who in turn will be the liaison person between your building or your department and the nearby community. So Mr. Ward, I hope that answers your question. Diane Gray, should drills be random or staff? Drills should be random because if your staff is prepared on that day, I'm sure a lot of the ladies will wear flat shoes as opposed to the heels. So when you're conducting drills, they're on a random basis. Only those persons on the health and safety committee or sometimes management should be informed. But other than that, it should be done randomly. Angela Newton, when should we see an evacuation drill for Bridgetown? Miss Newton, I cannot answer that question because that involves a lot of players like the Royal Barbados Police Force who would need to have the traffic management plan and everything. So I cannot answer that question at this time. Ricardo Ward, but it's an emergency situation where there might be loss of life. Mr. Ward, are you referring to the same situation where you were speaking about if the central bank is obligated to offer refuge to communities? Are you referring to that situation where you said there might be loss of life? Can you just type it in the chat? While I await other questions, Mr. Ward, go right ahead. Yes, I know it's not an obligation, but are you finished? Okay, Mr. Ward, as I said, to my knowledge, the central bank is not obligated because for security reasons. And even, okay, I see that, okay, you're referring to that segment of the question. As I said, for security reasons, they will not allow persons into the building. Even though it is in case maybe loss of life, they're not obligated. I can confirm for sure, but to my knowledge, they will not because of security reasons. Okay, I'm waiting in other questions. Ms. King, or do you have any other
Colleague,
questions? I have a message to you. I'm waiting. I hope I have answered
I'm not seeing
everyone's
any more.
question. I
I'm
hope I
not
have
seeing any more
answered
questions.
everyone.
You still have
Mhm.
time, colleagues, to put
I
your
know
questions
that.
in the
Yes, we
chat.
do.
Mhm.
So let me scroll back up. And I would also say for Mr. Ward, for sure, you can you can make sure you know your DEOs in the area. If you're not sure, you can always call the DEM 438-7575. I see a question from Cass. What are the initial requirements for a workplace after a volcano and or volcanic ash? Can you explain further, Ms. Cass, while I go to Angela Newton's question? We need one badly, and I'm presuming, Ms. Newton, that you're referring to the evacuation of Bridgetown. Climate change is impacting significantly on our coast there. Yes, I will agree that we definitely do need one, but that is out of my hands. As I said, that lies with the Royal Barbados Police Force, especially in terms of the traffic management plan. So I do agree with you that we definitely need an evacuation drill for the Bridgetown area. Kayan Goodrich, are you aware of the assembly points in the Robert Street Central Bank area? I am not aware. I know there was a time we would have visited the Harrison's College. They were doing a fire drill, and I know that the Barbados Fire Service had identified an area upwind for that school should the invent that there was a fire. But for the assembly points for the fire, Mr. Rich, definitely contact the Barbados Fire Service. And let me see if I can take a number for you while I await other questions, but especially for the fire, contact the Barbados Fire Service. I'll see if I can get a number. Yes, I'll type it in the chat. Barbados Fire Service is 535-7800.
Joanne, could you repeat the number?
Okay, I typed it in the chat. 535-7800.
Okay,
I typed it in the chat.
thank you.
Okay, with reference to prior resumption of duties in the workplace building, going back up to what Cass had answered, what are the initial requirements for a workplace after a volcano and or volcano ash? With reference to prior resumption of duties in the workplace. What I would say for the volcano ash in this situation, that was the first time for all of us. So it was a learning experience, but the building would have to be clean. But in the case like this, I would ask you to contact the Labor Department as it relates to the Shaw Act. So I hope, Cass, that helps you. Richard Moore, what are some of the roles that should be assigned to health and safety committee members? You have the roles. Do they have, for example, such things as, I will have to go back to the slide. You have wardens, floor wardens who can assist with, like, for example, helping to evacuate to make sure that every person has evacuated the floor. You may have like a communication person, you may have the chairperson, those kinds of roles. Richard Moore. So you let me know if that answered your question. Okay, many persons are not aware of the traffic management procedure for evacuation of the city in the event of a tsunami. Should there not be a readily available document provided by this question, Mr. Clark, is not for the DEM, it's for the Royal Barbados Police Force. So I would definitely have to put that in the parking lot. Yes, that is definitely for the traffic management plan is something for the Royal Barbados Police Force.
We have someone saying that they did not hear correctly with the which question is the which question are they referring to?
Richard Moore, I lost connected. Sorry, I did not hear Richard Moore.
Oh,
What are some of the rules and I was saying some of the okay, it's gone. Let me scroll back up. What are some of the rules that should be assigned to the Health and Safety Committee members? For example, wardens. You need persons to ensure that each floor is evacuated. So you need persons to be wardens to go and check on these floors. You need like a PR person, as I stated, for if your community is located close proximity to a densely populated community, to be the contact person, to be the liaison person with either the DEO or a representative of that community. Then you need the chairperson, the assistant chairpersons, the regular persons like that. Jamal Gill, I agree. I think traffic should be avoided for a tsunami in town, but again, that is a question or a statement or a comment for the Royal Barbados Police Force. Thank you, Michael Clark, as well. Has there been modeling for the Bridgetown area tsunami out there and flights to inform evacuation plan? I think that the Coastal Zone Management Unit, they're doing things like that, but I am not 100% sure. But I do believe that Dr. Bruce and his team at the CZMU are working on modelings for the area, for the entire island, even if it is in certain segments. Kathleen, is there a mini size for the health and safety committee? Is it based on, yes, it is based on the number of employees in your company. Thank you, Richard Moore, as well. I concur with your comments, Mr. Ward, as Angela Newton. I'm presuming you're referring to the central bank area. We're going down. I'm going to concur. I sit on the CZMU Tsunami Committee. Okay, Mr. Gill, you say you sit on the CZMU Tsunami Committee. Do you want to comment on that question? Do you want to comment on the question that Mr. Ward stated? Has there been modeling for the Bridgetown Reed tsunami at Vero and Rear Heights to inform evacuation? I know that they have done modeling for certain areas on the west coast, ranging from Sherman's in St. Lucie to Mullins Bay in St. Peter for sure. They have even earmarked evacuation routes and evacuation signage. That I know for sure. Michael's question is very important, particularly as escaping Bridgetown by foot and 15 minutes is totally impossible given the high ground is some distance away. I'll go back to Michael's question. What was Michael's question? Many persons are not aware of the traffic management procedures for evacuation of the city. Yes, Mr. Ward, I agree with you. It is very important, but as I said, that is a question in terms of the traffic management plan. It is a question for the Barbados Police Force, Royal Barbados Police Force. Jamal Gill, and there has been extensive work done on tsunamis. Yes, there has been. Yes, there has been modeling to an extent, right? Especially for the Speightstown area. Okay, yes, Jamal Gill, I agree with you. There have been extensive modeling done for the Speightstown area from the Sherman area, because from Sherman in St. Lucie to Mullins Bay in St. Peter, that has even been designated as a tsunami evacuation. That has been given the, what is it? I cannot remember the term, but there has been modeling. As I stated, signs have been placed and the evacuation routes has been determined. So take a visit to that area, Speightstown, Sherman's, Mullins, and you will definitely see those evacuation signs and the routes that you can take. Yes, signage has been completed for St. Peter. The committee has considered vertical evacuation. So going back to with Mr. Ward and Michael, if I may call you that, I cannot, Michael Clark's question. Mr. Gill has indicated that the committee has considered vertical evacuation for Bridgetown, that is using multi-story buildings to access in the event of a tsunami in the Bridgetown business area. Yes, I'm noting that you're stating on that. I can also state that drills were conducted at the St. Lawrence Primary School if any of you are familiar where that is located, and on that stretch of road, a safe evacuation point would have been where the Ministry of Agriculture is located. So that's uphill, right? That would have been a safe zone when you're evacuating from along that stretch where St. Lawrence Primary School is located. Angela Newton, I am referring to an evacuation plan tsunami impacted on the coastal, specifically Bridgetown, that is densely populated and close knit. Going back to Mr. Gill, he said that the committee has considered vertical evacuation for Bridgetown that is using multi-story buildings to assess in the event of a tsunami in the Bridgetown area. And just to add to that, yes, work has been done for all coastal regions in Barbados. So Angela Newton, Michael Moore, and Ricardo Ward, I hope that Mr. Gill was able to answer your question. I would suggest another presentation that addresses these major macro plans, example, tsunami, earthquake, flash flooding. Yes, Mr. Ward, that is indeed a good suggestion, but that would have to be done definitely in collaboration with the Coastal Zone Management Unit. And yes, Jamalge, you are indeed correct. Schools have undergone tsunami exercises. Yes, they are very active and doing tsunami. Yes, schools have undergone, yes, where evacuations were done during the month of, yes. Many schools, the Allen School, the St. Lawrence Primary School, what was considered the, I cannot remember the school in Spikestown, it's no longer there. The Alma Power School, they would have done the St. Albans Primary School. All of those schools would have done evacuation drills for tsunamis. Okay, they went up the right, yes, St. James Primary, and then went up the highway by the Trents. Yes, indeed. The Alma Power School, they would have evacuated to where the old District E police station is located. As I indicated, the St. Lawrence Primary School, they would have done evacuations, and they would have evacuated to the Ministry of Agriculture where they're located. Then the Allen School, they would have done evacuations from tsunamis. They would have crossed the road and gone upward on one of those hills located on the East Coast. I agree to include all the stakeholders, including the Royal Barber. Yes, Ms. Newton, indeed. Yes, they, especially where a traffic management plan is concerned, the Royal Barbados Police Force is a key player where that is concerned.
We have time for about 2 more questions.
2 more questions, yes. How often are drills, okay, mountain signage in town? And mountain signage in town. Okay. How often are drills to be done? This question was asked previously. Fire drills should be done at least, I think the Barbados Fire Service has stated at least twice yearly. Yes, and I would agree then that also earthquakes and tsunami drills should be done around that same time as well. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Oh, thank you, Angela, as well. In terms of effective communication, is consideration given to messaging for the deaf and blind. We try to, when we have press conferences or any meetings relating to advising the public, we do hire a person to do sign language. That's for the deaf, and for the blind, we're still working on those things, but we do try to do voice notes, voice messaging as well.
Okay, well, colleagues, we have
time. Okay,
we have
okay.
time.
Go ahead.
We have come to the
one more, but
oh, you want to give them time for just one more?
One
That's
more.
okay.
One
yes,
more,
just one more then.
My clock is saying 11:14. One more. Who will that person be? Mr. Ward, you have had a lot of questions. Will it be you? Will it be Mr. Michael Clark?
We seem to have.
Thank you, Ms. Green, as well. So there don't seem to be no more.
Okay, so
Oh, here it
we
is.
have
Dun,
one.
dun, she was late. In the event that there is no emergency plan in place, how does an entity go about creating one? You can contact the Department of Emergency Management. Ms. Brown, I will send you a format, a layout, a draft layout for a template for a plan, but you can contact the Department of Emergency Management 438-7575 or DEM, that's Delta Echo Mike INFO. I'll type it in the chat. DEMINFO at barbados.gov.bb or 438-7575. Let me just double check. Correct. And yes, you can get a copy of the template and an example of the plan. Yes, Ms. Goodrich. You can get a copy of the plan and a template.
Okay, so colleagues, we have now reached the end of our Q&A. Joanne, do you have any other parting words for our colleagues?
Just to thank all those persons who offered suggestions, who took part in the polls, who even gave up their time to sit and listen to me during this presentation. I want to say thank you. If you need any further information, if you need guidance to draft your plan, feel free to contact the Department of Emergency Management. Again, 438-7575. DEMinfo@barbados.gov.bb. We are here to help you. Thank you. Over to you, Mrs. King.
Thank you so very much, Joanne. Thank you so much for that very informative session. Colleagues, thank you so much for your questions. What we're going to do now, we will invite you to to give your feedback. Our producer, Michael, will type the feedback form, the link to the feedback form for you in the chat. You can click on the feedback form, which opens up the form for you. You can fill it out with your answers and submit the form forthwith by clicking on the submit prompt. So ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our webinar presentation. And like I said, please do not forget to complete that evaluation form. Your feedback is very important to us. As you complete your feedback forms, I take this opportunity on behalf of the Director General, Ministry of the Public Service, and the Learning and Development team to express sincere gratitude to Ms. Joanne Johnson for a very informative session and for taking the time out from her very busy schedule to present this important information to you. I also extend thanks to the management and staff of the Department of Emergency Management for continuing this partnership in educating and enhancing the knowledge of our public service employees. Ladies and gentlemen, I also thank you again for your participation in this very important session. Thank you for your questions, your comments, and of course, your feedback. I also wish to convey many thanks to the Learning and Development Directorate team for the assistance and support in the production of this webinar. Thank you very much, Michael. And we also have our colleague Desiree working in the background. Thank you so much for that, Des. So I encourage you to look out for the ad for our upcoming webinar on ergonomics and remote working best practices. Now that a lot of us have been given the opportunity to work from our home or remotely, I would appreciate that because we are not in the office setting, we might be impacted by, perhaps not having the appropriate workstation set up per se, but look forward to our webinar on ergonomics and working remotely, best practices to guide you on how to manage setting up your workstations at home. Colleagues, I want to wish you a very pleasant good day, and do continue to have a safe and productive remainder of the week. And of course, as we approach the end of the week, please do have a rest-filled and a wonderful weekend. I will give you some time to complete those forms. You all are most welcome.